Now, do you have experience in examining items and bones that have experienced or show evidence of trauma?
Yes.
Okay. What sort of trauma have you observed in bones, just generally?
Generally, the types of trauma on bone that can be categorized are blunt trauma, which is from something with a relatively large surface area moving at a relatively low speed. There's also sharp trauma, which is identified as trauma resulting from impact from an implement with a very small surface area, or such as a bevel or a point. Or high velocity projectile trauma, which is trauma due to a small surface area object moving at a high rate of speed.
Okay. In the bones for Tylee Ryan, did you examine them for evidence of the trauma?
Yes.
Okay. And what sort of trauma, if any, did you observe?
On 3 of the bones, I identified sharp trauma.
Okay. Which 3 bones did you identify sharp trauma?
That was the left and right innominates, or hip bones, and the sacrum, which is the back of the pelvis or the bottom of the spine.
Okay. And for reference purposes, let me show you again, States Exhibit 182A. Can you point to us on the diagram that's up there on 182A and show us generally what you're talking about?
Yes. So these are the 2 hip bones. This is the right side and the left side. And the sacrum is the one right in the middle at the base of the spinal column.
Okay. And that's areas where you found evidence of sharp trauma?
Yes.
Something sharp, a knife or a hatchet or something of the like caused injury in this area?
I can't identify the specific tool type, but it was something with a small surface area, such as a beveled edge or a point.
Okay. And a tool mark examiner would be the person who might try to identify what object would do that?
Yes. The procedure in my agency is the anthropologist identifies the location and general nature of sharp traumas, and that's then forwarded to our firearms and tool marks unit for additional analysis.
Okay. Now, let me show you, just for reference, at States Exhibit 182B, which is a close-up of that area. Okay. Could you again point to us the area where you saw the trauma?
Yes. So this is the right innominate or right hip bone and the left side, and the sacrum in the middle.
Okay. Thank you. Now, did you document the injuries that you saw?
Yes, I documented the sharp alterations that I observed.
All right. Let's start with your item 16. And let me show you States Exhibit 181C. Do you recognize that?
Yes, that is a photograph that I took during my examination, annotated with numbered indicators of the sharp alterations.
And those annotations were put in there by who?
I added those.
Okay. And I know you answered defense counsel's question, but since it's in front of us, why did you enter those annotations?
So just to make it clear in my documentation and report where these alterations were located. Also because these 2 photographs are taken from 2 different views, and numbering them helps to clarify that some of them can be visualized on both sides of the bone.
Okay. When you say visualized on both sides of the bone, that means the front side and the back side?
Yes.
Okay. And how many areas of sharp trauma did you identify?
On item 16, which is the left innominate, there were 5 sharp traumas.
Okay. Are these type of traumas consistent with something happening inside of her, like a disease or a natural process?
No.
Okay. Why not?
A disease process affects the bone in a much different way. So a disease might cause the bone to react or respond to that disease by, for example, depositing what we call woven or a very loosely organized bone that results in a weakened area of bone. A disease process might also affect an entire bone or the entire skeleton, for example, in a loss of bone density. In this case, what's seen are alterations to the bone from an external force with no evidence of that response or remodeling.
Okay. When you say an external force, something or someone penetrated and pierced this bone?
Yes, this was an external force imposed on the bone.
Now, have you had experience in looking at bodies that have been dismembered?
Yes.
Okay. Are there areas when a body is dismembered where you expect to see issues that are, or injuries as evidence of dismemberment?
Typically, sharp traumas in dismemberment cases occur around joints.
So when you say around joints, what does that mean?
Around parts of the limbs and body that join together. So, for example, where the arms or legs or head meet the torso.
Okay. So the 5 sharp instrument injuries that we see in your item 16 on the exhibit before you, are these all evidence of dismemberment?
These would not be typical of dismemberment.
Okay. What are they typical of?
I can't say exactly what sort of action or implement caused them, but that some sort of external small surface area object impacted the bones.
So why do you say they are not consistent with consistent with other injuries you've seen for dismemberment?
Because these do not appear, these aren't near joints. So typically dismemberment, the objective is to break the body into smaller portions, and that's why the joints tend to be targeted. In this case, all of these sharp traumas are in the area of the pelvic region.
Tylee, JJ, and Tammy can't tell us what happened, but their bodies do. You heard testimony about the testing that was done on Tylee. One, they had to do DNA testing just to identify her because she was too broken up and too dismembered. You heard Dr. Christensen and Mr. Halapaska talk about puncture wounds in her pelvis. How those wounds were not the wounds of dismemberment. They're separate wounds in her pelvis. J.J. Vallow, gagged and bound. Tammy's body, bruises consistent with restraint, homicide by asphyxiation. This is Tylee. Here are the marks talked about by Dr. Christensen and Mr. Halapaska. That's not where she's being dismembered. Mr. Halapaska said those marks are consistent with stabbing.